Walk into any British pub today and you'll find the same menu. Burger, fish and chips, maybe a lasagna that's been sitting under a heat lamp since Tuesday. But 40 years ago, pub grub meant something different. It meant dishes that actually required a kitchen, not a microwave. Number 18 on this list was once so popular that breweries printed recipe cards for landlords. Number 7 caused actual fights over the last portion. And number 1 was served in nearly every pub in Britain until a single food safety regulation wiped it out overnight. These weren't just meals. They were the reason working men chose one pub over another. Before we start, hit subscribe, because some of these dishes deserve a proper comeback. Number 25. Faggots and peas. The faggot sat in a pool of thick onion gravy, split open and steaming, surrounded by mushy peas so green they almost glowed under the pub's nicotine-stained ceiling. Made from pig's liver, heart and belly meat, bound with breadcrumbs and wrapped in caul fat, faggots were the publican's answer to feeding a hungry workforce for pennies. In the Black Country and South Wales, a portion cost about 1 shilling and sixpence in 1965, cheaper than a pint of mild. The smell alone could pull men through the door. Rich, savoury, impossible to ignore. Publicans bought them by the dozen from local butchers, each wrapped like a small parcel of offal and herbs. They'd simmer in gravy all morning, ready for the lunchtime rush when factory workers had 45 minutes to eat, drink, and get back to the line. The dish vanished slowly, pushed out by squeamish customers and pubs that found frozen lasagna easier to stock. Today you might find faggots in a supermarket, but the pub version, swimming in proper gravy with a basket of bread to mop it up, that's gone. Number 24. Steak and kidney pudding. Not the pie, the pudding. There's a difference that matters. A proper steak and kidney pudding came encased in sweet pastry, steamed for 4 hours until the crust turned pale and yielding, ready to collapse under a spoon and release a flood of dark, glossy gravy. Pubs in the Midlands and North made these in individual basins. Each one turned out onto a plate like a savoury dome. The kidney had to be lamb's kidney, diced small so the flavour distributed evenly without overwhelming the beef. Too much kidney and customers complained. Too little and they complained louder. A serving cost around 2 shillings in 1958, substantial enough to replace both lunch and tea. The problem was time. 4 hours of steaming meant planning, meant a cook who arrived before dawn. When pubs shifted to microwave-ready pies in the 1980s, the pudding disappeared almost overnight. The last generation to eat it in pubs is now in their 70s. Number 23. Scotch eggs from the bar. Every pub had a glass dome on the counter, sometimes 2. Under one sat pickled eggs floating in cloudy vinegar. Under the other, Scotch eggs stacked like cannonballs. These weren't the smooth, uniform supermarket versions. These were rough-coated, handmade by the landlord's wife at 6 in the morning. The sausage meat still showing finger marks from where it was pressed around hard-boiled eggs. They cost 6pence each in the early 1960s, perfect with a pint when you needed something solid but didn't want a proper meal. The yolk inside stayed bright yellow, sometimes still slightly soft if you were lucky. Health regulations in the 1990s killed the bar-top Scotch egg. Unrefrigerated meat sitting at room temperature was suddenly a liability, not a tradition. The glass domes vanished. The last holdouts were country pubs where inspectors rarely visited. Now a Scotch egg comes shrink-wrapped from a distribution centre 3 counties away. Number 22. Pork scratchings made in-house. Before the foil packet, before the brand names, pork scratchings came from a biscuit tin behind the bar. The publican's own recipe. Strips of pig skin, salted and roasted until they curled into bubbling, crackling shards. Some added paprika. Others swore by malt vinegar in the final frying. The tin was refilled weekly, sometimes daily in busy pubs, and regulars knew exactly when a fresh batch had been made by the smell drifting from the kitchen. A handful cost 3pence in 1962, scooped out with bare hands and served on a square of grease-proof paper. The salt made you thirsty. That was the point. When packaged scratchings became widely available in the 1970s, publicans stopped bothering. Why spend hours rendering pigskin when you could order boxes from the brewery? The homemade version, still warm and dangerously crunchy, exists now only in memory. Number 21. Tripe supper. In Lancashire pubs, particularly around Wigan and Bolton, tripe wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Served cold with salt and vinegar, or hot in a white onion sauce that puddled across the plate, tripe suppers drew crowds on Friday nights. The texture put off southerners, but locals considered it a delicacy, the honeycomb variety especially prized for how it held the sauce. A portion cost around 1 shilling and 8 pence in 1955. Pubs near tripe dressers, the specialist shops that prepared and bleached the stomach lining, had the freshest supply and the best reputations. Oral histories from former regulars describe the ritual. A pint of mild, a plate of tripe, and an hour's peace before heading home to the wife. The tripe shops closed one by one through the 1970s and 80s. Without suppliers, pubs couldn't serve it. The last generation that genuinely craved pub tripe is dying out, taking the taste with them. Number 20. Bread and dripping with pickles. Some pubs charged for this. Most gave it away. A thick slice of white bread spread with beef dripping from the roasting tin, served alongside a pickled onion or a spoonful of piccalilli. It appeared at the bar around opening time, meant to soak up the first pint and keep customers drinking longer. The dripping came from Sunday's beef, strained and stored in ceramic pots that sat on the back shelf beside the spirits. A thin layer of jelly formed at the bottom, deeply savory and slightly salty, the part regulars fought over. Working men's clubs in Yorkshire and County Durham served bread and dripping well into the 1980s. The dish asked nothing of a kitchen, just bread, fat, and something sharp to cut through the richness. It vanished when pubs stopped roasting their own meat, when dripping became something you bought in a packet rather than saved from the joint. The ceramic pot on the back shelf was replaced by a microwave. Number 19. Potted shrimps. A small brown pot arrived at the table, clarified butter setting firm over pink-grey shrimps packed tight beneath. You'd spread them on hot toast, the butter melting into the bread while the shrimps kept their shape. Morecambe Bay shrimps were traditional, tiny and intensely flavoured, seasoned with mace and white pepper. Coastal pubs from Lancashire to Norfolk kept potted shrimps as a permanent fixture, particularly in the summer months when day trippers wanted something light between pints. A pot cost around 2 shillings in 1960, served with a basket of toast points and a wedge of lemon. The dish required almost no cooking, just assembly and refrigeration, making it perfect for pubs with minimal kitchen space. It faded when fishmongers stopped stocking brown shrimps, when the labor of peeling those tiny creatures became too expensive. Supermarket versions exist, but the pub ritual of spreading your own pot over hot toast while nursing a half of bitter, that's been lost. Number 18. Lancashire hot pot. Breweries loved Lancashire hot pot. It was cheap to make, impossible to ruin, and kept customers in the pub for hours. Recipe cards went out to landlords in the 1950s and 60s, complete with instructions on portion sizes and suggested prices. The dish itself was simple. Lamb neck chops layered with onions and potatoes, slow cooked until the meat surrendered, and the top layer of potatoes crisped golden. A serving cost around 2 shillings in 1958, often accompanied by pickled red cabbage from a jar on the bar. The smell filled the entire building. Regulars could tell from the street whether hot pot was on the menu. Pubs in Lancashire, Yorkshire, and Cumbria competed fiercely over whose version was best. Customers had loyalties. Arguments happened. The dish required hours in the oven, attention that modern pub kitchens refuse to give. Frozen ready meals killed it slowly through the 1990s. A few gastropubs serve hot pot now, at £12 a portion, but that's not the same as the pub version that fed a working man for loose change. Number 17. Peas pudding and ham. Peas pudding is older than the pubs that served it, a dish that predates the Norman conquest. In northeastern pubs, particularly around Newcastle and Sunderland, it arrived alongside thick slices of boiled ham, the yellow split pea mixture, firm enough to slice but soft enough to spread. The flavor was subtle, earthy, improved dramatically by the salty ham juices that pooled on the plate. A portion cost about 1 shilling and 4pence in 1960. The pudding itself was cheap, made from dried peas that cost almost nothing, but the combination with good ham elevated it to something worth choosing over pie and chips. Stotty bread, a flat, dense loaf particular to the region, often accompanied the dish, perfect for building impromptu sandwiches between bites. As pubs consolidated their menus toward nationally recognized dishes, regional specialties like peas pudding vanished. It survives in a few shops and homes around Tyneside, but the pub serving it with ham and a pint of Federation bitter belongs to another era entirely. Number 16. Jellied eels. East London pubs served jellied eels in white bowls, the grey-brown chunks of eel suspended in quivering, translucent jelly. The taste was difficult to describe to outsiders. Savoury, slightly fishy, with a texture that fell somewhere between firm and gelatinous. Working-class drinkers in Bethnal Green, Stepney, and Whitechapel grew up eating eels, both jellied and stewed, from the pie and mash shops that surrounded every neighbourhood pub. A bowl cost around 9pence in 1955, cheap protein for dockers and market workers who needed fuel between shifts. The eels came from the Thames estuary, caught locally and sold fresh at Billingsgate. When pollution killed the eel population and tastes shifted toward less challenging foods, the dish retreated. Pie and mash shops still sell jellied eels, but the pubs that once kept them on the bar, served cold with a splash of vinegar and a pint of brown ale, have long since switched to chicken wings and nachos. Number 15. Stewed eels, the hot version of the above, and arguably more popular in winter months. Stewed eels came swimming in parsley liquor, a thin green sauce made from the cooking water, flour, and masses of chopped parsley. The bones were still in, requiring careful eating and a technique that regulars mastered early. East End pubs served stewed eels with mashed potato, the green liquor soaking into the mash and creating something that looked unappetizing but tasted remarkable. A portion cost around 1 shilling in 1958. The dish required a kitchen capable of actual cooking, not just reheating, which made it increasingly rare as pubs modernized. Fish and chip shops still serve stewed eels in parts of London, but the pub tradition died with the generation that considered eel a normal Friday night meal. Their children eat fish fingers. Their grandchildren have never tried eel at all. Number 14. Welsh rarebit. Proper Welsh rarebit, not the cheese on toast pretending to be the same thing. The pub version involved a sauce made by melting strong cheddar with butter, mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and sometimes a splash of ale. This sauce was spread thick over toasted bread and grilled until bubbling and slightly charred at the edges. A serving cost around 1 shilling and 6pence in 1962, often appearing on the menu as a light supper option between the heavier stews and pies. The sauce was the key. Too thin and it slid off the bread. Too thick and it wouldn't spread. Landlords guarded their ratios jealously. Welsh pubs obviously claimed superiority, but English pubs served excellent rarebit too, particularly in cider-making regions where the cheese came from local farms. The dish required fresh preparation, which was its downfall. When pubs stopped making sauces from scratch, rarebit became cheese on toast with Worcester sauce drizzled over top. Not the same, not even close. Number 13. Beef and onion pie with sweat crust. Not short crust, not puff pastry, sweat crust. The difference mattered. A sweat crust absorbed the gravy from the filling, becoming soft and rich on the bottom while staying slightly firmer on top. Pub pies in the Midlands and North used sweet as standard until the 1970s, each pie made in individual dishes and served still bubbling from the oven. The filling was simple: braised beef, masses of onion, and enough gravy to flood the plate when you broke through the crust. A pie cost around 2 shillings and sixpence in 1965, served with chips or mash depending on the establishment. Making suet crust required skill and time, neither of which modern pub kitchens possess. Frozen pies with puff pastry lids replaced the handmade versions, their fillings grey and their crusts soggy within minutes of leaving the oven. The suet crust pie, properly made, remains one of British cooking's great achievements. Pubs stopped serving it anyway. Number 12. Devilled kidneys. A dish that sounds Victorian because it was. Devilled kidneys appeared on pub breakfast and supper menus from the 1890s through to the 1970s, lamb's kidneys split and grilled, then served in a sauce of butter, mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and cayenne pepper. The sauce was sharp, hot, designed to cut through the richness of the kidney and wake up the appetite. A portion cost around 1 shilling and 8 pence in 1960, usually served on thick buttered toast that caught the dripping sauce. Gentlemen's clubs served devilled kidneys at breakfast, but working-class pubs adopted the dish for supper, a substantial plate that paired beautifully with a pint of strong ale. The kidneys had to be fresh, cooked quickly, or they turned rubbery and unpleasant. When pub kitchens stopped handling fresh offal, the dish vanished. Modern squeamishness about kidneys finished the job. A generation has grown up never tasting devilled anything. Number 11. Cottage pie with real mash. The distinction matters. Real mash meant potatoes boiled, drained, and mashed with butter and milk on the premises. Not reconstituted powder. Not frozen discs reheated in the microwave. Pub cottage pies in the 1950s and 60s started with leftover roast beef from the Sunday joint, minced and mixed with onion gravy, then topped with proper mashed potato and baked until golden. A portion cost around 1 shilling and 9 pence, filling enough to see a man through an afternoon's work. The mash was the test. You could taste immediately whether the publican cared. Too thin and it sank into the meat. Too thick and it turned gluey. Getting it right required attention that modern kitchens won't give. Cottage pie still appears on pub menus, but the version made entirely from scratch, with real beef and real mashed potato, survives only in pubs that genuinely cook rather than reheat. Number 10. Stuffed pig's trotters. This one surprises people. Yes, British pubs served pig's feet. The trotters were boned, stuffed with a mixture of sausage meat and breadcrumbs, then braised until tender. The result was rich, gelatinous, deeply savoury, served with mustard and a pile of chips. Agricultural pubs in Somerset, Devon and Wiltshire kept stuffed trotters on the menu well into the 1970s, a farmer's favourite that used parts of the pig no one else wanted. A serving cost about 2 shillings in 1962. The preparation was labour-intensive, requiring a butcher's skill to bone the trotter without tearing the skin. When pubs stopped doing their own butchery, when suppliers stopped offering trotters, the dish disappeared. French restaurants serve pig's trotters now, calling them a delicacy. British pubs served them first and called them tea. Number 9. Oxtail stew, the most gelatinous dish on this list and one of the most flavourful. Oxtail stew required hours of braising, the bony tail sections surrendering their collagen slowly until the sauce turned thick and glossy. Pubs served it with bread for dipping, or sometimes with mashed swede and carrots on the side. A portion cost around 2 shillings in 1960. Cheap because oxtail was butcher's waste, too awkward to roast and too bony to mince. The meat came off in shreds, clinging to the bones, requiring messy hands-on eating that didn't suit prissy customers. Working men's pubs in Birmingham and Coventry served oxtail stew well into the 1980s. The smell could fill a street. Regulars knew which day each pub made fresh oxtail and timed their visits accordingly. When oxtail became fashionable in the 2000s, prices rose tenfold. The cheap pub stew became impossible to make profitably. Another dish lost to its own success. Number 8. Black pudding with apple. Not just black pudding with something to cut through the richness. In Lancashire and Yorkshire pubs, that meant slices of fried black pudding served with stewed apple, the sharp fruit balancing the iron-heavy blood sausage. A portion cost around 1 shilling and sixpence in 1958, often appearing on the menu as a starter or light supper. The black pudding had to be proper stuff, made locally with oatmeal and real blood, not the bland supermarket versions that appeared later. Bury Market remained the epicenter of black pudding production, and pubs within delivery distance served the best versions. The apple was usually Bramley, stewed to a rough puree with a little sugar, served hot alongside the crispy-edged pudding slices. When pubs stopped sourcing from local suppliers, when health regulations made blood sausage production more difficult, the dish faded. Black pudding survives as a breakfast item, but the pub supper with applesauce belongs to another time. Number 7. Game pie. This one caused actual arguments. Landlords in rural pubs made game pie from whatever the local shoots produced. Pheasant, partridge, rabbit, pigeon, sometimes all four combined in a single pie with a hot water crust that stood up without a dish. Each pub had its recipe. Each recipe was declared superior to every other. A slice cost around 2 shillings and sixpence in 1965, served cold with pickles and salad, or hot with gravy and chips depending on the season. The pie was often enormous, baked in oval dishes and kept under glass domes on the bar, sliced to order throughout the day. Country pubs in Norfolk, Suffolk, and the Scottish borders built reputations on their game pies, drawing customers from miles around during shooting season. When game became harder to source legally, when hot water pastry became a lost art, when pub kitchens shrank to fit only a microwave, the game pies vanished. Gastropubs occasionally attempted, charging £18 for something that once cost pocket change. Number 6. Liver and bacon with onion gravy. Before liver became a dinner party ingredient, it was pub food. Slices of lamb's liver, quickly fried until pink inside, served with crispy bacon and a lake of onion gravy dark enough to stain the plate. Mashed potato absorbed the gravy. Greens were optional. A serving cost around 1 shilling and 9pence in 1960. The liver had to be fresh and cooked fast. Overdone liver turned to shoe leather, and regulars complained loudly if it happened. Pubs in the Midlands and North served liver and bacon as a standard weekday lunch, quick to cook and satisfying enough to fuel an afternoon's labor. The dish required a cook who understood timing, who could judge when liver was ready by touch rather than temperature probe. When pub kitchens stopped cooking from raw ingredients, liver and bacon disappeared from menus. It survives at home, occasionally, made by people who remember eating it at the pub with their fathers. Number 5. Steak and oyster pie. Before oysters became expensive, they were working-class food. Abundant and cheap, used to bulk out beef pies and add a briny depth to the filling. Steak and oyster pie appeared on London pub menus from the Victorian era through to the 1960s, each pie containing half a dozen small native oysters mixed with chunks of beef in a gravy enriched by their liquor. A slice cost around 2 shillings in 1958. The oysters came from Whitstable or Colchester, delivered fresh by rail and shucked in the pub kitchen. As oyster beds declined from pollution and overfishing, prices rose beyond pub budgets. By the 1970s, steak and oyster pie had become a luxury dish, eventually disappearing from pub menus entirely. Steak and kidney replaced it, using offal instead of shellfish, but something was lost in the translation. The original pie, briny and rich, represented a time when the sea was generous, and pubs made the most of it. Number 4. Chitterlings. Pig intestines, cleaned and braised until tender, served with mustard and bread. Chitterlings were contentious even among those who ate offal regularly. The smell during cooking was powerful, the texture unusual, the taste acquired. But in agricultural areas of the West Midlands and East Anglia, chitterlings had loyal followers who considered them a delicacy. Pubs that served chitterlings did so on specific days, often Saturdays, when workers had time to linger over a meal that required commitment. A portion cost around 1 shilling and sixpence in 1960. The dish required a cast-iron stomach and a tolerance for organ meats that many never developed. When the generation that grew up eating chitterlings during rationing and agricultural hardship passed on, demand collapsed. The last pubs serving chitterlings closed their kitchens in the 1980s. The dish survives in the American South, ironically, but British pubs have forgotten it entirely. Number 3. Brawn. Head cheese, if you prefer the continental term. Brawn was made from a pig's head, boiled until the meat fell away, then set in its own jelly with herbs and spices. Sliced cold and served with mustard, pickles, and bread. Brawn was a pub staple that required almost no last-minute preparation. A serving cost around 1 shilling in 1958. The texture was mosaic-like, different muscles and bits of skin creating variety in every bite. Brawn sat under glass domes alongside Scotch eggs and pork pies, sliced to order throughout the day. Making brawn required access to pigs' heads, which butchers provided cheaply to anyone willing to do the work. When supermarkets replaced local butchers, when pigs' heads became difficult to source, brawn disappeared from pub bars. The dome that once held brawn now holds nothing, or crisps. Number 2. Cheese and onion pie. Not a pasty. A proper pie, with short crust pastry encasing a filling of strong cheese and softened onions. Pubs in Lancashire and Yorkshire served cheese and onion pie as a vegetarian option decades before vegetarianism became common, feeding workers who couldn't afford meat every day and women who fancied something lighter. A slice cost around 1 shilling in 1960, served warm with pickles or cold with salad. The cheese had to be Lancashire or a strong cheddar, something that could hold its own against the sweet cooked onions. Making it fresh required a baker's skill with pastry and a willingness to offer something other than meat. When pub menus consolidated around national favorites, regional dishes like cheese and onion pie vanished. Bakeries still sell it in the north, but the pub version, served on a proper plate with cutlery and a pint, has been gone for 30 years. Number 1. The plowman's lunch. Not the supermarket version, not the sad plastic-wrapped assembly that passes for ploughmans today. The real thing. A proper pub ploughman's in 1965 meant a wedge of local cheese, probably cheddar or Stilton, a hunk of crusty bread baked that morning, a pile of pickled onions, a spoonful of proper chutney, and butter you could actually taste. The plate cost around 2 shillings. It required no cooking, just assembly and quality ingredients, which was why it worked so well in pubs with limited kitchens. The cheese was the test. Pubs that served industrial cheese revealed themselves as uncaring. Pubs that sourced from local farms built reputations. Here's the twist. The ploughman's lunch as we know it was largely invented by the Cheese Bureau in the 1960s as a marketing campaign to sell more cheese. But that doesn't mean the pubs didn't make it properly. They did. The bread was fresh. The cheese was aged. The pickle had been made by someone's grandmother. What killed the ploughmans wasn't changing tastes. It was industrial food production. When the same ingredients became available pre-packed and portion-controlled, pubs stopped assembling plates and started opening packets. The bread came sliced. The cheese came plastic-wrapped. The pickle came in single-serve sachets. Everything that made a ploughman's worth eating, the care in selection, the freshness, the sense that someone had bothered, vanished beneath cellophane. Here's what all these dishes have in common. They required publicans who could actually cook, or at least assemble ingredients with care. They required suppliers who sold real food rather than frozen portions. They required customers willing to wait more than 3 minutes for a meal. We lost all 3. The dishes didn't disappear because they stopped being delicious. They disappeared because the British pub stopped being a kitchen and became a reheating station. The landlord who once made faggots from scratch now microwaves a burger. The cook who braised oxtail for hours now pierces film lids. The customers who waited happily for hot pot now complain if their nachos take longer than a card payment. But here's the thing. These dishes could come back. Every one of them. The recipes exist. The ingredients exist. What's missing is the will to make them, and the customers willing to pay for them. Next time you're in a pub, ask what's made fresh. Watch the landlord's face. That pause before the answer tells you everything about what we've lost.